Well, I say we've been enjoying the conference here this year, and we've been learning lots of new things from language implementers and companies that name software after their family. So MJ Software, after sort of minutes of rigorous testing, have come up with a new application. It's called Chris PowerPoint Auto Clicker, CPAC for short. Right? Hopefully, it's going to be a little bit more reliable than John Daintris. And so, oh, Chris, you didn't get the memo, did you? We've gone cross-platform. Could you correct it? Right, thank you. That's better. Hopefully nobody noticed. Right? Now, this is what we're going to talk about. At the moment, we're all using Quad WC and the other related system functions. And what we really want is now we all have gone cross-platform, we really want a way of getting that stuff running on the internet, across platform. So, I mean, I would really love to see a Quad X, C, and the other system variables. It'd be really good. But, and to say, with this application, we actually minimize the changes, or we aim to minimize the changes needed to run a Dyalog WC application across platform. And practically with almost the same effort that Chris used in the first slide. And while also adding the features you see in modern GUIs and also third-party controls. Unfortunately, the Quad X functions aren't available in 18. So unfortunately, while that's happening, we've created a few functions, lowercase q, WC, and so forth, while we wait for them to implement it in 18 if they could. Anyway, we have had a few questions after Christopher's demo on Monday. And we had to make it absolutely clear that QWC uses exactly the same technology as the app that he showed on Monday. And the one difference between them is that the Monday application, because you edit the XAML directly, you have to compile that for it to show up in the GUI. But Quad WC is actually pre-compiled by us, effectively, and that because it doesn't affect the XAML and things behind, then it does not need compiling for changes to be reflected in the GUI. So that's the only difference. And I say also, in the two demonstrations, the one on Monday and the one today, both the server and the browser have been using Windows. But neither side requires Windows to run. Both sides can be whatever platform. And the only thing that is a requirement at the moment is that the compilation has to be done under Windows. But if a server's set up the way you can submit your submissions, it's a very simple process just to submit them and come back. So that would also remove your dependency on Windows. But anyway, let's get to the interesting bit, because I've got fed up writing slides. Now, you'll see here that we just loaded up the socket server. The server is on the left-hand side, you see here, and the right-hand side is the browser that you see. And Chris has just started up the browser. That actually has MJ software, there's not enough room. And you'll see that the server has connected to the first user. And he's now going to, because we can't type. Right, and now you'll see there's a line there. If you could see the left-hand side, it might be slightly bigger. It's a little bit wider, you can't see the left-hand side of the, oh, push enter anyway. And you see that a form has been created on the browser side. And the line is identical, really, to what you were doing in Quad WC, apart from the fact that we have made the same sort of effort at the beginning and changed the quad for a queue. And if you keep going, you'll see I've chosen to bold. That really should be not bold, but it is there. And you'll see that we have a text box that's been filled up. And if you keep changing the text, but you'll see that the lines of code are basically identical to what you would type in with Quad WC. And that is a server on that side, which could be anywhere, and this is the server that could be anywhere. Right. And again, you now try moving the form around the browser window. So gone down to 88, as you'd expect. It's gone across 85, and you'll see how it's very fast and smooth. And I have to point out that the speed would be the same even on a slow connection, because the only information that's being transferred from the server to the browser is a small little packet saying position and two numbers, effectively, to say move it. And nothing else is transferred backwards and forwards. Only small packets of about sort of 20 characters or so every time something happens. So even on a slow connection, once the stuff is loaded at the beginning, it would work very quickly. And it also works for resizing. And they're smaller. And also, I should point out that all of the controls you see over on the right-hand side can be styled in the same way WPF controls can be styled. I haven't bothered with the styling because I'm more interested in getting the controls working, and then I can make them look almost any way I want once they're done. So these would actually even move closer to looking like Quad WC controls once we've done the styling. And say you can use multiple lines. And the other thing we should point out that Chris has only just started learning APL, and one of his test programs to do was actually to process the line, the position, the size there, to actually work out the positional version of Quad WC where you don't have the properties there. So you 20, 20, 300, 400. It's written and actually works very well, but we haven't put it in yet, so that's not there. But it will be available in the next release of that. Chris, do you think I ought to do this? You sure you... After Monday? We found out why it didn't work on Monday. It was because he had pause on error in the thread sessions, and so the threads all stopped. Oh, right, good. Now you'll see that we also can use the dot notation for the assignment. Now you'll see there that user dot exists. There was a reason why I started using user at the beginning, because that was like a single namespace. But actually I've worked out a way that I can eliminate the user at the front. So actually, again, the next version that I create of this, that would have been fm.position, not user.et. So it's actually back again, matching the Quad WC format. And I should explain now about the data binding, data context, because another question that came up from the Monday talk was that we didn't make the data binding, data context very clear. And I should draw your attention now, because there's an example of everything on the page here. You see the user that's assigned from WSGetUser. That, under the definitions that we used on Monday, is actually the data library. And that is the collection of data contexts that are stored, where we had the shared data contexts and the individual data contexts. And they are merged together in the WSGetUser, and you get one data library of all of those data contexts. In this example, because they're individual sessions, every single data context that's within user is actually an individual one, and there are no shared ones, but you could actually mix them. So you could actually have one item there created that was actually across all the browsers. The FM, in this example, is the data context that's contained within the data library. And in fact, 2 lines down, the dot text is another data context that is in the data context FM. So you see that's the tree structure building down. But each one of those items is, in fact, data context in this example, and the text, the position and size are properties within the data context. So what happens is you change a property in the data context in the server, and the data binding takes the data context in the server and changes the relevant property on that side. So it's all handled by standard WPF-style data binding. You change a property in the data context, and the data context triggers an update on the other side. So all you're sending between the server and the browser is the small packet for the data binding, saying, I change this variable, make the change there. And nothing else gets transferred between the two sides. Right, and as I said, I've already said the user dot will not be in a future release. Although I have to say this is prototype, so I think future release is a bit optimistic. Anyway, and also the server now will send a greeting back. The browser will send a greeting back to the, that's actually wrong. It's actually the browser will send a greeting back to the server. So, gonna leave the threads alone. Yeah, got that? PF12. Yeah, good. And you've got the text back from that side. And also for the traditionalists, you can also do it that way. Both ways work. I'm going to add a button. Right, there we have a callback defined, and you'll see that I've now defined a button. Now, if you look at the event, I'm using the same structure for the event. I also allow that the onSelect in the callback will actually return back the namespace, the data context, and if you leave the on/off, you get back the text of the object in the same way that Quad WC does. So this in case, because we've used select, you get back the text fm.button, where if you had used onSelect, you get back the actual reference to the object. And now, we're getting very, I'm going through this far too quickly. But I thought there might be a few questions at the end. So because it's a prototype, we're being safe, closing that down, and we'll show you the multi-user now. And you get multi-user for nothing, I should say. Absolutely nothing. So that's the WebSocket server started. And hopefully CPAC will create a few objects for me. Pardon? It's QWC test. You've got to start the browser first. Connection. That's it. So that's now starting up the browser, and we've got a user connected. The demo thing assumes you've got this far. Yeah. Right. So we have test, Control Enter. Good. So bring this up. And now I've commented out the first line, because at the moment we're defaulting to pixel. But if you noticed when Christopher demonstrated the previous application, he was very keen to show you that when you change the size of the browser, the sizes within the showcase of the the CS-HTML5 controls actually did record the changes in the browser shape. We could very easily implement proportional and all the others by simple divisions and things like this, but we've concentrated on getting it right first with pixels because it's easier. And so if you want to go through, so the only thing we've changed still is the queue. So that's the form. Keep going. So capture again, it's in bold, it shouldn't be, but I can change that. And now we're going through the menu items. Right? And they're not particularly good examples at the moment because SyncFusion do a better one, but I haven't had a chance to convert it yet. So, right, and you come down, you've got the buttons there. And hang on, you've gone too far. And you'll see at the select, he was supposed to stop on the red line. There are a few bugs in this CPAC. We'll have to reassess the programming. But if you look at the line above the select, there's a cancel callback. We've also allowed the 101 as a left argument. So the left argument of your callbacks are also there. And the top one, the OK callback, it has no left argument. You'll also see the line that's highlighted now is a combo box and has items, and it's just simple text in the same way that Quad WC is. Continue on, Krista. And there's a combo box created in test, so they're all being created to go through. And there's also a very rudimentary grid at the moment, but it will be able to support, I would say, practically all the features of the APL grid. Again, I've just used the standard theme that came with it. That can be styled using standard style type mechanisms, but that's prettiness, and I want to get it to work first. And the same with the true is the combo box. You can get rid of that blank line and make it look more like a standard WC thing. And you see the data comes in very easily. And now this is interesting. This is effectively Quadlex at the moment. It basically means when the form is loaded, run the function test, which is exactly the one we traced through. So every time a new user now connects with a browser, it will load everything up, and once the browser starts, is ready, it will start test. So he's now hopefully starting up a couple more Googles. Well, they already started. So we got 3 alongside. We thought we'd show you them loading up alongside each other. So now we're in multi-user at the moment, or we will be when it starts up. There's the local host, and he does this one as well. So you've got the splash screen coming up, which can be anything. 1 and 2, so one's connected, second's connected, gone blank. Leave it alone, Christopher. And you'll see the things are creating, and they're being created in parallel. It's a little slow because it's in parallel, but it goes through. There's the buttons, and there's the combo box, and the grids will come. Leave it alone. Thank you. Right, so now we have 3 forms, right? We'll go back and yeah. So we now have the data for 2016. I mean, I just chose a 3 thing. That's it, good. And then this scrolls quite nicely. And if you come back here, I noticed it's different. We did it particularly to be different data, different size data. Right, so 3 users. None of them have authenticated, so we have to use the index into their connection. So we're using 1, 2, and 3. Had you been authenticated and we'd got a user ID, we would have used, well, oh, you're doing that right first. I've got ahead of myself. Sorry, I'll wait. Right, so now we've got user 1, that's a guest. Had they been authenticated, we could have used the text string of the user. And you've now got 3 data libraries, one from user 1. And you wouldn't use this particularly because this is just to show you what we can do. Normally, every time you call a callback, the correct set of variables are created for that user. We've just actually got all 3 users' data there just to show you what can be done. I wouldn't necessarily recommend having all of the data like this. But it is just to show you what can be done. So I say they're 1, 2, 3 because they're guests effectively. Now here you have user 1 dot the values. You should be able to get the 1, 2, 3, 4. And so on. And the other one is 15, and that's user 3, has the larger array. I did a row rather than actually show the numbers because it's a bit big for that small space. Okay, almost there. Oh, come on, Chris, hurry up. Oh, come on. All right. Now, this is an interesting one. These are the combo box items. Where are you going? Is that one, is it? All right. We'll get rid of the other 2. That's it. The other way. We only need that one. Right. So now here we have the combo box. If you show the combo box, you'll see, oh, that one big. We need 2 of them. That's it, right? Yeah. And you see the combo box. If you go to the combo box, you'll see those are the 4 items. So they're just a strand. So now if you do this is quite nice. Want to add another one, another year. Time moves on. And you get 219. And if you then go to another window, you will see that that's not there, because only that user added it. And that's it, really. I think we're probably the fastest demo ever. Good. And if you divide what we did, it's not bad compared to 2 minutes or 3 minutes. Now, so that's the demo. Now we move on to the next one. Where are you going? Right, thank you. Go on the next slide. Now, there's a few questions we've been asked this week by various people who have seen them. And one of them is this one, which I think quite a lot of people will be wondering, because my server is obviously important. Now, actually, the 2 are actually 100% compatible, because the very, very first version that I created of this used something from Gil, who presented to the SWED APL user meeting a rather simple WhatsApp, poor man's WhatsApp, using WebSockets. And he used something called mySocket, which is a class very similar to my page. So in fact, the original version of this did actually run through my server. And I think it was, I haven't been using it for a while with my server because I tend to use IIS and Apache. But there is no reason that with the mySocket type class that we couldn't actually run this also through my server and as a nice, healthy component within my server. And therefore, you could add clever bits of WebSockets and say, it should be compatible. However, Brian's obviously worked on it since I use my server. I've done things as well, but I would perceive anything where the 2 didn't work together as a bug that Brian and I would have to probably work together. So if you wanted to use my server and do that, but you had some little things you want to do, then something like this would actually be able to work quite nicely with it. It also works independently as well, so you have the choice. And the other question I had was, would it work with HTML renderer? Well, it works with anything with WebSockets, JavaScript, HTML5, and CSS. So once WebSockets gets added to HTML render, which I think is fairly imminent, then it will. And really, that's all there is. I should mention that one thing also about this is that the product that's used to create it, one thing, they're promising me speed-ups of 20 times on what you saw there with the running. I don't know whether I'll get 20, 10 would be quite good. And also, the other thing that they're doing is they are creating versions under WebAssembly. So as time moves on, and I suspect JavaScript will become legacy, this will also be future-proofed and will work under WebAssembly later. So they are promising me a compiler that will produce this under WebAssembly for modern browsers and JavaScript, HTML5, CSS for old browsers. So it should go on with the data binding as and when.